recorded in the beautiful mountains of British Columbia. Welcome to
Friends on Horses.
Welcome back to Friends on Horses. Today we're joined by Callie King from CRK Training. Callie is a blogger, a YouTuber, and just has a wealth of knowledge about the equine world that she passes on through these platforms. Callie, would you like to introduce yourself for our listeners?
Sure. So first, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. And I am, I think the thing that I'm most passionate about is kind of two pieces. One is understanding horses and training, and especially the kind of so-called problem horses. When I first opened my barn 10 years ago, and even before I had a barn, I really like to focus on that. I have always enjoyed the time with the horse. Has been the most important thing to me, whether that's riding or doing groundwork or even just spending time with them in the field. And then I'm also a riding instructor, and I really have a passion for helping, especially new and returning riders that also share that just wanting to have the relationship with the horse as really be one of their first priorities. So with that, I have a barn in Honeybrook, Pennsylvania that we have a riding school. So we have right now we have 8 school horses, and we do training here as well. We do some events and clinics and, host other clinicians. And then I also have a business in creating educational courses and programs. Some of them I teach, many of them I bring in other experts to teach. And that's been really fun too, because it's just broadened kind of our community of horse people that have the same values just across the world. We have students now in every continent except for Antarctica. So we're still looking for someone there who's a rider. But it's a lot of fun.
World domination. That's awesome. I would love to, sorry to if I interrupted your flow, I got excited. But
not at all.
There's a lot of pieces there. First off, I want to say that we had Andrea on the podcast, and I think you've connected with Andrea, who's another really cool and interesting trainer.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm excited to see all of the people that you're connected to. And then I would love to hear where your interest in problem horses comes from, or what appeals to you about problem horses.
I think I've noticed that a lot of times the kind of so-called problem horses are often so intelligent, and that's why I really enjoy working with them, because I find that many times they actually learn really quickly, and that's part of why they are sometimes having problems. They don't just kind of fit a regular mold as easily. And also other times I find that it's with behavior problems, it's not even necessarily just behaviorally. There's something physical that's going on, and when I can help figure that out for the owner and the horse, it just makes it's really nice to help a horse in that way, and just see, once they're comfortable, how their behavior can completely change.
Right. I'm sure that it's really kind of reinforcing to you to be helping this horse that was having probably a challenging time, and then you also get to see the rider experience that their horse is actually pretty cool and intelligent, and then you get to see them working together and kind of change the perspective a little bit. Do you find that happens?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's often, I love working in the cases too, where I can be working with both the horse and the owner. And a lot of times when someone's struggling with their horse, there is kind of this feeling of animosity, a lot of the narrative around that is horses need to be more respectful, or they're, taking advantage of the rider. So to help someone understand that, be able to relate to their horse in a different way, and understand that it's probably not those causes at all. It's either just the horses, how they're feeling physically, or helping them feel more connected and work with their horse in a different way, that all of a sudden it's like that communication is so much more clear between the horse and the person. It's super rewarding.
Awesome.
I'm really curious. I just want to kind of loop back because there were so many beautiful parts of your intro that I want to make sure we touch on. How did you kind of go from just your interest in horses into kind of moving to having a stable and kind of bringing a greater community together?
Yeah, I would say I've ridden since I was pretty young. And when I was younger, I had kind of the vision or the dream of wanting to be a competitive rider, and especially in show jumping was really my interest. So I kind of pictured myself, maybe having a barn, having a string of horses, and really focusing on competing. And then I worked at a few different facilities that kind of disillusioned me from that. And it's not that I feel that all competition is bad at all, but just for me personally, I kind of got disillusioned from those experiences. And I got much more interested, instead of just how do we get the horse to perform, when I was working there, and there would be horses that was the goal, was the performance. But I just had a feeling that it wasn't, to me, that wasn't the most important thing. I wanted to see how can the horse be more comfortable, more happy, and actually that would probably increase their performance more than just trying to find like the right training aid or the right exercises that would kind of make them do it. So that was, when I was working at other barns before I started my own, that was kind of the direction I was going. And I also noticed at the same time, a lot of times the people that were coming in that were just getting into horses, or maybe they had ridden when they were younger and then took a break and were getting back into it. So they were, more of that novice horse community, and they had so much interest, but a lot of times their basic questions weren't answered very well, and they were kind of feeling frustrated. They were missing out on a big piece because it was just go to the barn, get on the horse, take a lesson, and that was kind of the extent of their interaction. So I had this idea for being able to do things a little differently, run a barn in a way that was hopefully more conducive to the horse, as far as lots of turnout and really looking at nutrition and all the different pieces that go into what I was seeing as the behavior. And then have a place also that was like bringing in really, really the top people, but make it a learning environment that for the students, there wasn't any feeling of, like, oh, that's a dumb question, or, you should already know that, or just kind of using language that sometimes for people that are novice, it's like a whole new language to come in and learn all these equestrian terms. So I just wanted a place that would give them the really high quality instruction, but in a way that was just fun and embracing like where they were at in the whole riding journey. And then it makes it fun for the experienced people too, because sometimes, even those of us that have a lot of experience, there's like some of those foundational pieces that it's nice just to be able to discuss and not have any type of an air of, oh, you should know that, or you should already be doing that.
It's interesting because I was sharing with Emma this morning before you got on. I was going through your website, and one of the things that I really noticed that was a big theme there was just how approachable all of the topics were in the articles and even the videos. It really stood out for me.
Thank you. Well, that means a lot, because that is definitely one of our big goals when we create any of the content.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed too is you have a lot of videos on there of just little kind of how-tos or just little kind of basic pieces. Wondering if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. How that actually started is I started the barn first, and I had students coming in, and I was teaching here, and it was hard to figure out how to work in a lot of the extra pieces with the model of, I've got students coming in each hour for lessons and need to kind of keep on some form of a schedule and give them the riding time that they want. So that's how I started creating videos, because I wanted to be able to teach some of the other pieces so students could say, come early and spend some time in the field, or be able to go out and feel confident haltering their own horse and bringing them in for their lesson. So I started creating a lot of the videos on those little topics that I felt like were not addressed in kind of a standard lesson program, and were things that I felt would really enrich my students' whole experience of being with horses and understanding more of the bigger picture beyond just getting on and riding. So that's how it started. And then as I started creating those for my students, I started posting them publicly, and they started to kind of get attention, and it just started going from there.
That would have been pretty exciting, I bet, to see it kind of taking on a life of its own.
Yeah, it was. And it was definitely one of those things, I think, like with a lot of how, traffic and everything works with websites is it started really, really slow for the first several years, and then it just started to pick up speed. And the more that it picked up speed, it, more and more viewers coming in, and then more ideas and opportunities to partner with people like Andrea to create the courses. And it's a ton of fun, really, because it's getting to work with such a awesome horse community. We really are all friends, even virtually, the people that are in courses that we never get to meet face to face.
That's wonderful. And there's this theme to everything that you do that I really, really like. And you have your own theme, so let me know if I get this entirely wrong or if you want to add to it. But there's this kind of feeling of making it easy for equestrians to learn and covering a lot of those basics in the right way. And then also, because you're doing that, you're impacting horse welfare at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that is a really big thing for me too, because I feel like both horses and humans' lives can be so enriched when the interaction is more of a full experience, instead of just how can we get the horse to perform and how can we get the horse to do what we want to do. When we bring in that piece of learning communication, which, to me in training, that then gets into understanding behavior and understanding learning theory and kind of the science behind learning and training. And when we can understand those pieces and then learn more about the horse's social behavior, it's a constant journey of learning and just going deeper into that. But that really provides a good foundation for going and learning the more technical pieces of riding and training the horse, from, the physical development. And it's all very, it's all fun. Sometimes there's so many different pictures or pieces to the puzzle that I think when people are starting, it can feel overwhelming, but just to kind of embrace each level of where they're at in the process, and enjoy learning that piece, and just know that there's always going to be more to go. It's one of the things that is awesome about horses. It's just a lifetime of working towards mastery, not really achieving it.
Isn't that true? Isn't that how it works?
Yeah.
Oh, I also want to tell people that so we started our YouTube channel not long ago, and they should watch, because Callie is sitting against an arena, and every once in a while a horse goes by. It's such a cool atmosphere.
Yeah, I love this. Building this indoor was actually a dream, because it opened up being able to host more events. We couldn't have people coming in and flying in here to do an event when we were in an outdoor arena and it might rain. And so having this indoor, and then we have, like I said, when we were beginning the podcast, we actually have really strong Wi-Fi, because we do a lot of live broadcasts of events and stuff in here. So it also makes a fun backdrop for Zoom calls.
That's great. And now I want to kind of kick back to one thing that you mentioned, just to clarify. So you said that, so when you're talking about educating people and bringing them through these levels, you mentioned educating people on learning theory. And I want to clarify, is that for humans, or are you talking about the science of learning theory applied to horses?
I would actually say both, because where I mentioned it there was in the context of learning theory applied to horses, understanding when we're using pressure or when we're using rewards, how to use that in the more effective ways, so that the horse can understand and we're on the same page with what we're trying to teach the horse, and help the horse understand that we're doing that effectively. But it's also just as true for people. I mean, learning theory also does apply to people. Of course, some of it's a little different, but a lot of it is actually on a basic level. It's kind of the same. We learn through a lot of the same mechanisms. And with people too, there's the added piece, especially when we get into riding, that riding is such a movement-based activity, but a lot of times it's taught very intellectually. It's taught a lot verbally, and it can be difficult for people to make that connection between what an instructor is telling them to do, and then how they translate that into what they actually do with their body and how they move their body. So it's actually both. I really focus on, especially, you know, having the educational programs and education kind of being the core of what we're doing, whether it's for horse or person. I try to really learn as much as I can about human learning as well, and especially like kinesthetic and teaching movement, and how that can be how it can just be better taught. Because when we're succeeding at something as a student, it makes it more fun. It's a lot more motivating to keep going, and it can actually, you know, speed up the learning. It's true for horses too. You know, when we're building on success, if we keep having failure after failure, it just gets frustrating, and we don't learn as quickly. So it's figuring out how to set exercises up, even if it's through an online video context, that the student can really get it and feel it and know what they're doing, have confidence in that.
It's such an interesting model, and just so different from how a lot of coaches out there approach training, which is really inspiring. I'm curious, have you noticed a theme over the years of just, you know, what people want to learn about, or maybe, you know, just questions that kind of keep coming up in the same area of teaching or training for you?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. I'm thinking of what the most common ones are. I think probably one of the most common is where people that, so there's kind of different levels, I guess. People that have their own horse I get a lot of questions around, you know, like, I just don't feel like my horse is enjoying what we're doing at all. I have to chase him around the field or go out and lure him with grain to catch him. And then, you know, might be either wiggly, or it might be the opposite, where he just kind of stands there and seems disconnected. So I get a lot of questions just around that. And then even with the riding, it's things like he's not standing very still at the mounting block, or I get on, he doesn't want to go forward. So it's helping people kind of break down the different factors that could go into that, and, you know, help figure out, is it looking at a physical problem? Is it something that they need to even change equipment? You know, with riding, having the equipment that fits well so that the horse is comfortable is such a big piece. So that's a big piece for those that are owning their own horses. And I think on the other side, with people that are maybe going to barns and taking lessons and riding that way, not into ownership yet, I get a lot of questions there on just a lot of the basic, more common riding instruction, you know, where they'll say, I've you know, being told heels down, but I'm getting knee pain when I ride, or I don't really understand, like, I'm trying to put my heels down as low as I can, but I'm still feeling really insecure. Like, a lot of questions around those, again, basic common terminology and what does it actually mean.
That's so interesting, and it loops right back into just that whole idea that is just such a common thread through what you do, of just making it approachable, breaking down those little pieces for people.
Yeah, and what I actually really love too is we have a lot of instructors now that are super open and on board with even advising their students to go and like take one of our classes, because what we find is there's many instructors and especially trainers that are excellent at what they do. Like, they're amazing riders, they're often really good at training the horse, but that piece of teaching riders and teaching the human student is kind of a whole nother piece. And a lot of times it's something that trainers, you know, they've focused on the horsemanship piece, which is awesome, and they're usually excellent at that, but they might not be as good at being able to communicate that. So when we can kind of come in with the courses, a lot of our focus is also helping our students in the courses know how to better, like, ask their instructor to clarify instruction. And that might be like, can you come over and actually move my arm where you're telling me you want it, or how you want it to feel on the rein. Or it can be even like, can I watch you ride so that I can better see what you're actually meaning when you say, give the leg aid in this way, and helping to even translate, you know, if an instructor is using a term, heels down, but the student can now understand what that actually means they need to do with their leg, instead of perhaps translating it into just pushing harder in the stirrup. They can go into their lesson with, you you know, it's the same type of lesson. The instructor is still providing that really good eyes on the ground, giving them feedback, but they can translate it in a different way that's going to be a lot more effective for them.
What a cool idea, Callie. Really cool idea. And it's interesting, while you were talking, I was thinking about one of the instructors that I had growing up, and this instructor was fantastic, but they were an advanced rider, and they would just get so frustrated with beginners. And it's not like they didn't like teaching, but I think breaking it back down again was just not their skill set, you know? So then having a place to send these people, and like, okay, I want to teach you, but go here and, you know, get these foundations and basics that I struggle breaking down for you, is a really cool tool for instructors to have, not just the riders.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, honestly, I've been there. It's just as frustrating for an instructor when you feel like you just can't communicate in a way that the student is understanding and they're not making progress. And I think sometimes when instructors do maybe get, you know, when there's that feeling of tension in a lesson and you know that you feel like your instructor is coming at you a little hard, I think sometimes that comes from their internal frustration of, you know, they really want to see you succeed and they want to see you make the changes they know will help, but not being able to communicate that effectively on their end, you know, it's just frustration all around. So the more that we can make the experience fun and where the people are having fun, it's going to be better for the horses too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so cute. I keep getting distracted by the horse that's behind you.
I know. That was my moment.
Catching my eye.
I'm like, oh, it's a cute pony. Good distraction.
Yeah, that's sometimes the downside of the arena, but still makes a nice fun interlude.
Upside.
Yeah,
yes,
we all like watching horses
as well. So just before we kind of started, you were telling us about you have sort of your home base in Pennsylvania. You've also just recently located to California. I'm curious what sort of the next year holds for you in terms of, are there any goals that you're working towards or any aspirations?
Yeah, well, my year actually looks very different than it had because of the whole, you know, world situation that we're in right now. So I was going to be doing quite a bit of a travel for filming projects, creating some new content, and also events. You know, we had quite a few events on the schedule, clinics, etc., here at the farm that have been rescheduled for later in the year or for next year. Some that we've just had to cancel completely. So, and also I had a big event that I was going to be training for. I am doing the Mongol Derby, and that got canceled this year as well. So my whole year has kind of opened up, which has actually been in many ways really nice because it's given me some space with the horses that I'm working on to just really kind of go back to like when I first started and just had the barn and wasn't doing as much travel and other things, where I just basically get to go out and play with horses every day.
I'm hearing that from a lot of people, of just how it is kind of nice to, in some ways, have just kind of that pause and just a little bit of extra space in life during this time. And I can imagine in the same token, with people being just home a little bit more and not able to travel to some of their clinics, it's really nice to have an online resource like what you provide to kind of keep that passion going. What the heck is the Mongol Derby?
So it's an event that I found out about a few years ago, and as soon as I saw it, it was a family friend that she's actually mailed me a newspaper clipping, and she's like, "This sounds like you," and I knew I wanted to do it, so it was just waiting and honestly saving the resources to do it. But it's a horse race in Mongolia. It's 1,000 kilometers, and you change horses about every like 40K, so about every like 25 miles. And the horses are the native Mongolia horses. They bring them in, the people that kind of put the race together contract with the local villagers and community, so they're using their horses, and it sounded like a ton of fun to me. So I'm really, I mean, I love like adventurous kind of competitive things like that, but I also am really looking forward to learning more about the culture, because the Mongolian culture is so based around their horses, and they're nomadic, so they're moving, and a lot of times the horses are living either in really big acreage or even just loose out on the steppe, and they know where to go out and find them to bring them in. So just that whole cultural piece is what I'm most like into, that made me want to do the race.
And how long is this race? Like, how many days would you be kind of out there?
You have up to 10 days to finish it. I think a lot of times, like the people that are in the lead are finishing around 8 days.
And are you kind of all moving together, like as a group, or like give us kind of a scale of how many people you're going to be with when you're doing this race?
Yeah, so there's 44 of us that are doing it, and that's like the number that they allow into each one. And we do all start at the same time, but then I think pretty quickly it gets pretty strung out. There's some, and it depends a lot on the horse that you get at each different leg of the journey. We've got some that are really quick, and some that are more slow moving, and some that don't have a lot of training and can be pretty interesting in that way. So they do have they have checkpoints, and they do check the horses. So your time, it's like with endurance, your time actually stops at the checkpoint when the horse's heart rate goes down. So they do have those checks in place that it's good for the horses. And they have a slogan for the race. I wish I could remember what it actually was, but it's basically like the horses have the easy job because they just go the short distances. I think they actually said the race is more about human abuse from doing that many miles and being out there in the elements. And so it'll be an adventure.
And what are you traveling with? Are you camping along the way? Like, I'm thinking about tack. Like, what does the tack look like? Are the horses tacked up? Like, there's all those kind of cultural pieces too.
Yeah, so we have like our saddle and our pack. And I think where that works is a lot of the horses are pretty close to the same body type. So,
Okay.
You can use the same saddle. So you go in, there is definitely some element to being in early, because you get to pick your horse. So if you're the last rider, you get the last straggler on the line when you come in. So there's the checkpoints. You can stay there overnight, and they do have a time, that you can't go back out after a certain time. You have to stop moving by that time. So if you're in between checkpoints, then it's finding someone to stay with, in their home or camping out.
Once you go and do this absolutely incredible thing that I now want to go do, you will have to come back on the podcast and tell us about your adventure. We can just do an adventure episode. That sounds amazing.
I would love to. Yeah, it moved. It was going to be this August, but it got moved, so it's going to be next July 2021 now.
Okay, we're counting on it, Callie.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So, and I'm like, how do I move on from that topic? Geez, that's amazing. I actually had a question for you from a little ways back. You had mentioned riders, who are focused on like having their heels down and are having knee pain. So I would love to hear a little bit about what some of those basic corrections that you would give to a rider who's struggling a little bit with their body and position. Because I think I read that you've got some centered riding experience too.
I don't have any like formal centered riding instruction, but one of my main mentors in learning the rider piece, and especially like the rider education piece and the body and movement, has been Wendy Murdoch. And she has a very strong centered riding. In fact, she was one of the few people that got to apprentice with Sally Swift for years. And she is also a Feldenkrais instructor, which is, Feldenkrais is a form of body work, and it uses usually small movements to bring awareness to different parts of the body. And it's super powerful translated into riding exercises. So in in learning with Wendy, I've produced a number of courses with her now and hosted clinics and done travel with her. She's really been a big piece of my education as an instructor. So that's, I would say, working with her as well as some other instructors. Angelo Telatine has been a huge one for me in learning the training of the horse, and he's also really excellent at kinesthetic learning exercises, you know, and changing quickly if verbal instruction isn't doing it, finding something that can help the rider get the feel of what we're trying to convey as instructors. So that's been my background, is just working with a lot of different people and then studying the human learning side. Just in psychology has always been really interesting, so I pick up random psych tech books and try to figure out how I could apply it.
That's so cool. Are there, if there are some basic corrections that most riders can make to help their riding style improve, like something that you see more commonly, do you mind going over a little bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably the most common kind of riding instruction is we're told that we need to sit up tall, you know, bring your shoulders back, make sure that you've got your heels down. And a lot of times how that's translated is very literally. So the rider will, you know, push against the stirrup in order to try to push the heels down. And what that does is, for one, when we're applying a lot of pressure to the stirrup, we start to limit the motion or the movement that happens in the joints of the leg, so the ankle, the knee, and the hip. And when we think about riding, we really need to be going with the motion of the horse. As soon as we start to try to brace ourselves in the saddle, we can no longer smoothly go with. Our joints lose, because as we start putting tension on joints, they lose the ability to make those little adjustments to be able to go with movement. So then going up to the upper body, what happens if we pull the shoulders back and take that really literally is the chest is going to come out and the back is going to hollow. So it's going to increase the curvature of the spine going into this position. So when we combine that with then bracing and trying to get heels down, it actually ends up in a really unstable posture. It makes riders feel stiff, like they just can't. People describe it as like, I just can't get with the movement, or I feel like when I'm trying to do rising trot or canter, it's taking a lot of effort and I have to like really try to hold myself on the horse. And when we can change how those things are interpreted and use our body in a way where basically we're aligning our body and then keeping joints soft and mobile, it makes a huge difference for riding. So the way that they can think about that is first changing the upper body. One really important thing is breathing down into the belly. Even that lowers the center of gravity. It lowers all of the organs. You know, you can think about it, if you tighten your stomach and tighten your core and start to breathe up into your upper part of your chest, your center of gravity, essentially your weight and all that weight of your internal organs has lifted. And if you let that down and breathe down into your belly, you've lowered your center of gravity. And that's a big piece for being on the horse. So starting with that, breathing fully into the belly, and that will already start to soften the connections, the muscular connections to the hips. It'll start to even just change mentally. We feel better when we can take regular deep breaths instead of feeling really tight and breathing more shallow. And then with shoulders back, instead of pulling the shoulder blades together in order to try to achieve that position, if you think about taking your sternum and just slightly coming out with your sternum. So it's basically expanding the top part of the rib cage. And as you do that, it allows the shoulder blades to slide back and down. So it's no longer using all the muscular tension to pull them together, but it's expanding through the top of the chest. And you end up with in a sense, a similar posture. And a lot of times if you watch the really good riders, and even that's why I encourage people to watch their instructor, because they're usually not actually riding around like this, but they're still going to stay shoulders back if they see someone curling forward. So if someone interprets that shoulders back as do this, now they're going to be tense and tight and feeling like they're unable to move with the horse and unstable. But if they interpret that as, oh, I just need to expand here, let my sternum come out and expand the rib cage, they're still achieving what the instructor was noticing needs to change, but in a much more effective way. And then going down to the other common one of heels down, again, if you watch many, the really good riders, their foot is actually level, or it might be a little below level. That kind of starts to depend on, everyone's got a different amount of flexibility through their ankle. And you don't have to have a high degree of flexibility in order to be stable. In fact, sometimes when people that actually have more of a hyperflexibility have more difficulty being stable. So it's not about the depth of the heel, but it's really about the motion of the ankle, the knee, and the hip. And then the knee pain is created when there's a lot of brace there. When we can soften those joints and allow just the weight of the leg on the stirrup, then it takes a lot of the stress off of the joints, such as the knee, and can really just, I've had a lot of riders that have actually come that have gotten used to riding in pain and felt that was just what they needed to do, or that they needed to somehow be fit or stronger and just work through the pain. But when they learn to use their body that basically an easier way, that it's just actually using less effort to achieve the same result, that pain can just go away.
I really like that. It's interesting. So as you were talking, I was thinking about as a kid, and I took riding very seriously. And I remember when I learned heels down as a beginner, I did exactly that. I would crank my heels down, and I would, wrap your leg around the horse, and then I would angle my ankles inward, so I was really cranked around the horse too. And in fact, eventually so much that it stretched out the ligaments in my ankles, and I totally tore my left, a ligament in my left ankle, and partially tore one in my right ankle. And for years, I would stand, like my most comfortable position to stand when I was tired was on the edge of my feet, with them cranked around, because those ligaments had been so stretched from me taking my instructor's instructions way too literally.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example, because as riders, many of us, I think, are a little bit of kind of a type A personality. Like, we want to do it well, we want to get better. And so we do take everything like to the extreme, and we try so hard. And sometimes, I think many times actually in riding, like the harder that we try, it actually gets more in our way than, than breathing and getting in the feel of it and going with the flow a little bit more. There's a place in the middle there.
Right. Let go a little bit and just find your seat and your rhythm, and don't worry so much about all of those little tiny pieces.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And even when we're riding, I mean, I always come back to, like, this should be fun. It should be enjoyable. And the more that the person is having fun, then the more that the horse can enjoy themselves too. And, when we're riding and we're going through that checklist of, okay, are my heels down? Oh, I got to sit up tall. I'm not sure if the reins are the right length. Oh, there's my left leg, coming up again. I mean, that gets in the way, that process of kind of constantly mentally checklisting your position and trying to be in the right position. It totally gets in the way of actually being able to feel movement and get in that place where you start to really reach like that flow state in riding, where you start to be able to just react to the balance or the movement of the horse unconsciously and just be able to go with, where it starts to feel really easy. So it's actually figuring out how to break that pattern of being so constantly thinking of trying to do everything right.
Right. Thinking about, think less about what are all of the pieces of me doing, and think more about how do I communicate effectively with my horse? How do I move with my horse? How do I communicate clearly with my horse? Kind of shift that perspective a little bit in that way. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, I would say that's part of it, but it's also a shift from actually going from literally thinking less. And of course, that's a process. Like, that'll occur at different levels. So for example, for a new rider starting up, of course, if they go out and they try to pick up canter, they're going to have to be thinking. They're actually operating like a little bit too far above skill level. But when the flow state is actually reached is when there's the right level of challenge and the right level of skill. And when that hits and the right intersection basically is when that flow occurs, where you find that you're not having to think through everything, but you are starting to just feel it. And that's, I think, part of what makes it sometimes difficult for the really good riders to also be really effective instructors, because they're so used to always being in that flow state that they're not thinking about what they're doing with their hands and what they're doing with their leg aids. They just do it. They feel it, they do it, and it's really an unconscious process for them. So when we're learning, it's just getting to that unconscious, that little bit of flow in different levels. For a new rider, they might find they can do it at walk, where suddenly they're walking and they're just feeling the rhythm. They don't have to think about the rhythm. They're just feeling it and able to start to react and respond to movements from the horse. And it's still within learning theory. It's still using pressure and release, but it's being able to do it so much more quickly and subtly that it starts to feel easy, and the communication just starts to feel like it's it just kind of flows between the horse and the person. It's still the same process that's happening. It's just that it gets more subtle and more easy.
Great answer.
For those riders out there that are maybe in that place where they're like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. I'm overthinking everything. I don't think I'm ever in the flow state. Are there kind of some key kind of like pointers or suggestions that you would kind of give to those riders?
I think the biggest thing, and it's actually the most simple, and that's where sometimes I think we can get into trouble, because when answers seem too simple, it's kind of like, well, yes, of course, that would be it. And that, we can kind of gloss by it because we're looking for like a bigger, more technical solution. But what I like to start with for myself with every ride, actually even before the ride, and then what I'll often come back to like in lessons is just breathing. Because it's such when we can have a rhythmic breath and we can have conscious control over the breath, even in the beginning, it's going to still be thinking because you're thinking about your breathing. But when you can get into the habit of coming back to that, the way that we breathe really does change us. It changes mental process, it changes physical state, and it's just such a simple but yet such a powerful thing. So I would say for someone that's in that space, come back to just focus on your breath. One way that you can exercise that I like to help to do that is focus on timing your breath to the horse's steps. So like just come back to walk, find an easy breathing rhythm. It might be 3 or 4 of the horse's steps for an inhale and then 3 or 4 for the exhale, whatever's comfortable for you, that it's not feeling like a strain. And that can help to kind of get in the flow. It gives you something to actually focus on that's happening, that's present, that's movement related. And as you start to do that with more regularity, you'll find that it starts to happen then without consciously thinking about it. And that's the process. We go through different levels of skill, we have to think, and then it starts to be able to just become part of the process.
I love that exercise because not only are you then tapping into your body with the breath, but you're actually reconnecting with your horse as well, and just bringing some of that not only mind-body awareness, but that kind of interconnection awareness of just, okay, where is that footfall happening, and just kind of recentering in that way. I love that.
Yeah. Another one that is along the same line is just feeling the senses. So it's kind of thinking about, okay, what am I seeing right now? And you might notice your horse, you might notice the grass or the sand in the arena, like just kind of taking in this different sights, and then moving to touch. And that could be feeling your seat bones, feeling the reins, feeling the contact and that little connection with the bridle or with the horse's mouth. And then it moves to, what are you hearing? And just taking in the sounds and moving through the senses in that way is also it brings you back to awareness of the horse, awareness of what's actually happening in the present moment, which is really what we're trying to do, and getting out of that process of, I need to be in this, I need to be in this could happen, what if he spooks in that corner again, all of those things that happen for all of us. So it's a constant process of just slowing that down and getting back into what's actually happening in the moment.
I really, really like that. It resonates, and it makes me think about especially as a kid, but still today, it's almost like I'm bringing some of those things that I do really, really well on the trail into the arena where I'm maybe a little too type A and hyper focused. Like when I'm
Yeah.
out, and when I was little, especially, it's like I'd be looking at like how pretty my horse's hair color was when the sunlight hit it, and how quiet it is, or the birds are chirping, how my body feels, in the saddle, and how cool that is. It's just like that, and then it would bring me into this real meditative state. And if I could bring that state into the arena, I feel like the horse and I would be extra happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun seeing the difference in teaching kids and teaching adults. And sometimes even with the kids, and I have to admit for my own type A personality, I really enjoyed it. And I have to sometimes remind myself of the joy of it because, with a lot of kids, they're just enthralled with the fact that they're hanging out with the horse and they're riding a horse and like, oh, this is so fun, I'm riding. And they're not thinking about like the fact that, their horse is careening around wherever they want in the arena, the instructor's trying to get them to do the 20-meter circle or, keep him on the rail. But just to see them being in that state of like, this is fun is, I think, a little bit more of what the adults need, because then the adults are so hyper-focused often on like, I need to do this right. And is this actually a 20-meter circle? Is it too small? Like they kind of, again, it's that middle ground of, we have to have awareness of what we're doing, but at the same time, it's also kind of nice to just get lost in the joy of like, we're riding a horse. This is cool.
Emma and I talk about that quite often, of how, we have such fond memories of being kids and, running around the stables and being out trail riding and going to our first show, and just those feelings that you get, like you say, just that like complete and utter just joy of being with horses. And it's almost like as adults, we're still chasing that a little bit somehow.
Yes.
It's like trying to get back to that place. This has been just so fantastic. I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface of all of these topics, but I'm also mindful of time because you do have some other commitments today. I'm wondering if we can maybe end the episode by you just talking a little bit about your website, what people can expect to find there, some of the resources that you offer.
Sure. So right now, the best place to go is crktrainingblog.com. That's our main website. And at this point now, we have hundreds of videos on there, hundreds of videos and articles. And I usually tell people use the search feature. So on the side of the site, there's a little search bar, and they can go there and honestly just search for what you're looking for. If it's, what does heels down mean? If it's what should I feed my horse? I do a lot of interviews. So, for example, that one on what do I feed my horse? We have several interviews with different nutritionists talking about different pieces, myths of feeding, those kinds of things. So lots of resources on there. And then for folks that, like what they see, connect with me as an instructor or one of the other instructors, we have, right now we have 10 different programs, everything from yoga for riders. So like helping with some of those physical aspects of mobility and body awareness and strength to help with riding, to courses with Wendy Murdoch on specifically like improving jumping position, course with Andrea on just more the relational components connecting with your horse. So there's a lot of opportunities for education, and we're striving to provide the education in all of those, different areas of horsemanship. So really kind of helping on that whole journey of riding and learning.
Great. And are you on Instagram, Facebook? If people like, when this whole world pandemic thing comes to an end, if people want you for a clinic or for, I don't know, if you do virtual lessons, how do people find you in all of those platforms?
Yeah, so we are on pretty much all of the social platforms. Have lots of videos on YouTube. That's actually probably one of the, for kind of like rich educational content, that's one of the best of the social platforms to find us. But we're on all as CRK Training. So you can search that and you'll find us on all the platforms. And yeah, we would love to have join a course, come here to the farm for events. I honestly, at this point, when we are in normal times, I'm traveling so much creating the educational pieces and also working on always furthering my own education that I don't travel and teach any clinics. I only teach here, but we have lots of opportunity to learn virtually and in person.
Okay, well, that was so fantastic, Callie. Thank you. I think, Mira, is that a wrap?
And that's a wrap.
All right. Well, thank you again, Emma and Mira. I loved being on. This was really fun.
If you want more Friends on Horses, you can find us on Facebook at Friends on Horses Podcast.
Check it out for all the latest and greatest horsey news.
You can find us on the web at friendsonhorsespodcast.com.
Or Instagram at friendsonhorses_podcast.
Like what you hear? Help us quit our hay jobs by supporting Friends on Horses. You can support us by rating our episodes on iTunes.
Becoming an ongoing sponsor through Patreon.
Or simply by spreading the word about our show.
Have some feedback?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us via email at friendsonhorses@gmail.com.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.